the competitive spirit of a woman is something that for the longest time has been underestimated. And perhaps the role model that I had in my mother, who went above and beyond in her nursing studies. She got advanced degrees from Columbia University, just to give you an example, is something that when I look back makes me proud and makes me feel that I can motivate other women, especially women from the third world.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host. I want to remind everyone that our podcast is a production of MD Coaches, a company dedicated to developing and empowering physicians and other healthcare professionals to realize a greater potential and to achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. My interview guest today is a native of the Republic of Panama, where she got her medical education and where her father was formerly the president. But most of her professional career as a pediatric gastroenterologist and academic researcher in pain medicine and spirituality has taken place in the United States. And in addition to being a highly regarded physician, she's also an ordained priest in the Episcopal Church. She has a very inspirational story, so let's hear my conversation with the Reverend Dr. Marta Illueca. It's my great pleasure today to be speaking with the Reverend Dr. Marta Illueca. She has a great story to tell, and I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation. So, Marta, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. It's really going to be a lot of fun, I think.
I think so, Randy, and thank you so much for inviting me to be with you guys today.
Well, it's an honor to have you here, and I'll just, by way of introduction, I'll tell you that I always like to start at the very beginning. So I want to know a little bit more about your origins. I know that you were actually born in New York, and I'm wondering if that means that you are a natural-born American citizen or if you were in New York for some other purpose, because I know you did your growing up in Panama. So what's the story on that?
Yes, well, it's very interesting. I was born in New York City, actually at the New York Hospital on the Upper East Side, at a time when my father was appointed ambassador to the United Nations. So right there, you know that I grew up in a diplomatic family. My father being a diplomat, lawyer, politician, and my mother being a nurse educator. So yeah, I was born in New York, and then when we shortly after that moved back to Panama, Central America, that is where I grew up.
Well, now I'm going to ask a question because I suddenly realize I don't understand how the rules work. I've kind of labored under the impression, as most Americans do, that if you were born on American soil, you're an American citizen. But since you were part of a diplomatic corps, I guess that didn't apply to you. Is that correct?
Well, actually, it is simpler than that. Having been born in the U.S., I am an American citizen, actually with a valid passport. Uh-huh. And having two parents who are Panamanian nationals, I am also considered a Panamanian born abroad. So I am also able to have a Panamanian passport. So you would call this a dual citizenship.
I see. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. But I gather the family moved back to Panama when you were rather small. So you did most of your growing up there. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And at what point did you begin to take on an interest in going to medical school?
Well, that was more at the beginning of my second decade of life. So I grew up in Panama, in a Roman Catholic family, and I say that because then I went to elementary and high school in a Catholic school run by nuns called Maria Immaculada, Immaculate Mary. And it was really early in my teens that I started to be fascinated by science. But I must give you the sneak preview right here that I also became very, very fascinated by spirituality. And this was probably connected to the fact that I lost a sibling, a sister, in my early teens. And I think that that really threw me into both the worlds of spiritual wanderings and also into a curiosity about medicine and healing and possibilities, for science to develop therapies for various diseases.
Mm-hmm. So, do you mind enlarging on that a little more? Was this some kind of relatively common childhood disease or an accident, or how did you happen to lose your sister?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. Actually, I was 12 and my sister was in her early 20s. And my sister died suddenly, which obviously is a major life changer for anybody out there who may be listening to us.
Of course.
And basically, it was due to a congenital heart condition that had gone undetected. We're talking the early 70s, to be exact, 1971. So there were conditions that were not yet very well understood in the world of medicine and cardiology. So now we know more about what causes sudden death in young adults. And the main thing about this is that obviously when you lose a loved one due to whatever reason, you're going to have some ponderings around the condition, the medical side of it. But also, at least in my case and in my family's case, there was also that religious and spiritual side of the greater purpose of life and the meaning of loss and tragedies and how do you make the best of it? How do you put together your life again to move on and perhaps follow a constructive life journey that can help other people who might either suffer from similar conditions or even people who suffer this kind of loss?
Obviously, that sounds like a really admirable way to turn a tragedy into something that can be good for everyone. But I'm interested now to know if when you got to medical school, did you immediately feel that this is exactly where you belonged and that eventually you would be able to make the world better?
Well, that is really, really a very meaningful question for me, Randy. Between my early discernment of what kind of career I wanted, so we're talking again about my early to mid teen years, and then finally deciding to go into medical school, I would say I was grounded enough in my own preference or likings for science that I knew I had a passion for biological sciences, anything that had to do with the science of life, the science of how the human body is formed and how it functions. So my first passion was actually biology, but I knew that living in a small Latin American country like Panama, that kind of career did not have a lot of future because we were not that developed in the world of research. And my hope was to do something that I could practice in Panama. So that added to the fact that my mother, whom I mentioned was a nursing specialist and educator who also had a passion for medicine, she helped me sort of direct my career goals. Perhaps it was her passion for medicine. Perhaps it was this wanting to understand life and death and disease that really made me turn into medicine as the most logical career that could fulfill all these curiosities and questionings and vocations. And what you say about when did I feel that I was in the right place, it was actually once I went into medical school, and when I made it to my first class in pediatrics. That's when I knew I was in the right space. I knew I wanted to work for children, for young people. um, it really opened up a horizon that I could only imagine prior to that.
Was it common for women to be in medical school in Panama? By the 80s, it certainly was in the U.S., but I'm wondering about Panama.
I got into medical school at the end of the 70s.
Mhm.
So, and then I finished medical school in the mid 80s. So by the time I got into medical school, there were already, I would say, between a quarter and a third of the class were women. And you're absolutely right. It did take some time for women to divert their vocational interest into professions like medicine. The vast
Sure.
majority were going into nursing, actually, and my mother went into nursing, and she really made history in nursing in Panama. She founded the very first school of nursing in Panama, and also the very first
Really?
college. Yeah, so for me, so I had a role model of how much you can do in whatever your field of expertise is. But to go back to your question, I get into school, medical school, late 70s. I graduated mid 80s. By then, I would say that women were approaching sort of half of the class proportion.
It sounds like medical school was actually a pretty good experience, but upon finishing, you made the decision to go back to the U.S. for your postgraduate training. How did that decision come about?
Yeah, well, I want to backtrack a little, Randy, because you made it sound like going to medical school was very straightforward in Panama. There's a very, but I think this is very important because unfortunately, the reputation of some schools in Latin America or in the Caribbean are not the best reputations. I am proud to say I studied in the University of Panama School of Medicine, which is an accredited university and one of the top medical schools in Latin America. But having said that, I want to explain that in contrast with going to graduate school in the United States, where the resources are such that students get wonderful, wonderful support to get them graduated. It is not the same. It was not the same in Latin America. It was not the same in my school. The University of Panama was very stringent and very strict about your performance. And we had no elective courses. So, whereas our American medical students have a choice of electives as they progress through medical school,
Uh-huh.
we don't. We have to take them all. We have to pass them all. And I think it's also interesting to say that our program is a combined program, it's a 6-year program that integrates the undergraduate studies for a couple of years and then the 4 years equivalence of medical school.
That's very interesting. I know that happens in a number of other countries, which sets it apart from the U.S., but it seems to me that that's a pretty good way to do it. Would you agree?
Oh, I totally agree, and but I have to say that in and of itself was a major way of sacrifice, dedication, and deep study. And if I may say so, I actually graduated with honors, and I was valedictorian of my class. And the reason why I mention this is really not to be presumptuous; it's more for saying that the competitive spirit of a woman is something that for the longest time has been underestimated, and perhaps the role model that I had in my mother, who went above and beyond in her nursing studies. She got advanced degrees from Columbia University, just to give you an example, is something that when I look back, makes me proud and makes me feel that I can motivate other women, especially women from the third world. And I hope that your podcast can get also to those countries, because with enough dedication and perseverance, and goal setting and creativity and inspiration, these things can be done, and they can be done the right way.
I have spoken to quite a number of physician guests, and to a person, those who had their beginnings outside this country tell exactly the same story that you do. And that is, you can do a lot of things, but you have to be determined. And my impression of a lot of medical students in the U.S. is that, I don't want to say that they appear to be entitled, that they think it's owed to them, but I don't think they have the same respect for it as people who grow up in countries where there are not so many advantages. Am I wrong about that or not?
Well, no, I don't think you're wrong, but I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that, because you do make them sound a little bit spoiled, and maybe that's true. But what I would say is that in a world like America and the United States, where so many things are taken for granted, mm-hmm. you have a whole different attitude that comes from that conditioning, that comes from the availability of resources. And I don't say this, I want to make it clear also to the folks that are listening to us. I am not venturing an opinion here, because remember, I came to the U.S. after medical school, having been accepted at Cornell University's pediatric residency program in New York City. And I did my residency program, and then I did a gastroenterology fellowship there. So I became very immersed in the American medical system. I became part of graduate medical education. I directed a fellowship program. So I'm talking from fact. And it is such a blessing when you look at everything that our American students have access to. But the sad part is that not everybody realizes what a major gift and blessing that is. And I think that mm-hmm. speaks to what you are saying about their attitude or their empowerment or entitlement, etc. Whichever way you put it, which is very real.
Remember medical school? You were confident, studious, hardworking, and you learned what to expect in all manner of patient care. Then reality struck. Regulations, expenses, staff management, and administration. Is this what we signed up for? Stress on the verge of burnout, no time for family, or the reason we got into medicine. Helping people. What are the options when you're afraid you're in the wrong career? Transition, teach, quit? What if there was another way? MD Coaches can help. We're a team of medical professionals with a century of experience in the clinical and business sides of medicine. More importantly, MD Coaches has been where you are, stressed and trying to navigate a world school didn't prepare us for. MD Coaches is your mentor, your confidant, to help you make your practice shine, navigate administrations, and successfully lead staff and projects. Or if you're ready to transition, we can help there too. MD Coaches is doctors helping doctors. Visit our website to receive a free, no-obligation consultation. Go to mymdcoaches.com/RX. That's mymdcoaches.com/RX. Isn't it time someone else was on your side? Don't let the business of being a doctor stop you from doing what you love. That site again, mymdcoaches.com/RX. Visit us today.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. You didn't just stop with your pediatric residency. You wanted to go into gastroenterology. I'm wondering what impacted that decision. And once you got there, were you happy with it? How'd it go?
What got me into pediatrics in the first place was both a personal vocational inclination, but maybe there was a little bit of a philosophical one also, because I've always had a very active spiritual life. I believe in a higher power. I believe in God, and I believe that there's an intelligence that created this universe. And this universe, as I perceive it, is ever expanding and ever recreating itself. And what I'm trying to say is that we live in a dynamic universe. And I think that all of life processes, specifically our human life, is also a dynamic process. Therefore, I was fascinated by the prospect of applying my scientific and medical training to the developing organism from the moment of birth into the end of the everlasting adolescence, which for some people goes into the 20s or 30s, by the way.
Yes, it does.
Right. And that was really something that inspired me. Being there from the earlier, when the opportunity came to help for the health and formation of younger organism, was really something that was very inspiring to me. So that was what got me into the pediatric space. But perhaps one of my gifts or of one of my brain talents is being very analytical and very focused and specific. So I soon realized that I wanted to focus on one of our body systems. And I really was looking for a specialty that would not only allow me to solve problems, but I wanted it to be something that made sense to me. I wanted something that also had some kind of procedural impact. So, GI, gastroenterology,
Sure.
has, endoscopies and other kind of testings, and it also, I wanted it to make sense. And I feel that the digestive system makes sense. We understand it pretty well. And we also have a nice armamentarium of interventions and medications that are based on the way that it functions, what we call the physiology or pathophysiology when it is sick. So putting all that together, it was really gastroenterology, the area that really attracted me. And that's the area that I pursued. And I enjoyed every minute of it.
It sounds like you were deliriously happy at bedside care, and this is a big switch. So can you tell us more about that decision?
Yes, I'll be happy to, because Randy, I had that question from my trainees and my colleagues, and I think that there was a very good reason for why I made that transition, or as they call it in the American society, a career move. I think that I was at a point in my career as a pediatric GI practitioner when I thought I had a reasonable understanding of the available treatments and diagnostic modalities for my specialty. And I also felt that we were at a point where we had what we had in terms of medications and treatments for many conditions, not for all of them, but for many conditions. And I started to get curious. And this goes back to my earlier comment about a universe that is constantly expanding and recreating itself. I was curious about how do you develop new treatments? So here I am with this armamentarium and collection of potential medications and treatments and interventions for this, variety of diseases in my specialty. But how do we go to the next phase of new treatments for those conditions where there are no treatments? How do you do that? And that curiosity really made me have what one of our American positive thinker authors called inspirational dissatisfaction. This was Napoleon Hill, who wrote way back a few decades ago, was part of that wonderful literature genre of positive thinking, etc. And I just wanted to be part of developing new medications. That's really what inspired me to take a look. And I did not I did not hasten to do that. I took my time, and I opened myself to opportunities, and I waited, and then the right opportunity came by. And I took this opportunity and became a director of clinical research for AstraZeneca in 2003, and I moved to Delaware to work for the Nexium team, Nexium being the purple pill. And I just want to make it clear, I have left AstraZeneca in 2014. I don't have any conflicts of interest, but this is the story of my life, and therefore I have to call things by their names. So that's how I transitioned into the pharmaceutical industry.
It's a very powerful story of no longer being satisfied to let people bring the answers to you. You wanted to bring the answers yourself, it sounds like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And to learn, how do you bring those answers to people? Yeah.
And then after another fairly lengthy period, I mean, you were with them for a good while. You got the itch to go back for more education. Tell me how that came about.
What happens is that as you get older and wiser, you also get more reflective. Having lost my sister early in life, threw me into a period of self-reflection, and self-reflection usually opens doors that you may not be aware of, doors of creativity and doors of inspiration. So ever since I was a teenager, Randy, I have been on a self-directed journey of spiritual discovery. And all through all these years that we have talked about my medical career, I also had this spirituality in action that took me to many places in the world. I traveled the world wanting to explore what's called sacred spaces, wanting to meet and study with spiritual teachers, wanting to find the meaning of life, find the potential of the human spirit, because I want to make it clear. One of my areas of current work is spirituality and wellness, spiritual wellness. And I believe that we are body, mind, and spirit. So that was a lifelong quest that I did on my own in a discreet, private way, my vacations, in my spare time. If you think that somebody can have spare time, well, I did find that it wasn't easy, but I did find spare time. So the moment came when all this came to a head, and in 2010, 7 years after my arrival to Delaware, I made an unexpected transition in my religious practices, because I was a Roman Catholic, as I mentioned earlier. And along the way, I discovered the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church is the American offshoot of the Church of England, the Anglican Church. And when I made that transition, what happened was that I discovered something that was not on my radar. I discovered that women were actually part of the ministerial force in the Episcopal Church. Women could be ordained deacons and priests, and I did not switch because of that. I made a switch because it really opened to me a horizon of inquiry, and continued spiritual growth that was a bit restricted in the Roman Catholic side. So, to make a very long story short, I transitioned to Episcopal Church, and this new horizon opened up to me. And this spiritual bug that I had in me, or seed, started to blossom. As usually happens when you have a vocation. You start to be steered in certain directions, and I soon realized that I was ready to take a step in that direction and integrate all my life of service towards health and healing into a space that was very dear to me, but that I had never really brought into my day-to-day practice, which was the spiritual side. So that got me to taking a decision in 2014 when I first qualified to take early retirement from my pharmaceutical career and go back to school. And I went into seminary at Yale University Divinity School, where I got a Master's of Divinity. And I don't want to overwhelm the answer to this question, but we will have to talk about the fact that when I did that, I also then enrolled in a pain program to try to connect my medical background to my newly found spiritual endeavors in the next phase of my career.
Well, I want to thank you for going ahead and conflating those two areas of study, because I was aware of your ordination, and you were actually in seminary while simultaneously working on your master's at Tufts, which sounds to me like it might have been literally tough on you.
So Tufts was tough, right? Tufts was tough.
That's a lot to take on. How'd you manage all that?
Okay, so and here's a message also for those who are listening to us that may be wondering about following their dream or following their vocation. When I was discerning my call to the religious order, so I'm using a technical term, Randy, because the discernment is a long period that you are required to go through, because you need to make sure that you want to do this.
Right.
Okay, you need to make sure, because here you're not only dealing with people's lives on this earth, but you're dealing potentially with whatever their beliefs are for the afterlife. So this is not something that you can take lightly. And during my discernment, I had many conversations with my bishops. So the way this worked, for those who are listening to us, in the Episcopal Church, and this is also true of the Roman Catholic Church, when you discern a call to ordination, you have to work very closely with your bishop, the bishop of your diocese. And one thing that I was always advised to do by my bishop and by my advisors were, how do you keep your feet also into your medical background? Because this is not about God wanting you to negate, all of a sudden delete everything you've done in medicine, because God cares about healing, and you've done so much work in healing. How do you bring those two together? It was really in my last months at Pharma that I attended a meeting on behalf of my company, which was AstraZeneca, as I mentioned. And what happened was that I had been assigned to a new medication that was meant for people that suffer from pain, from chronic pain. So all of a sudden, my last few years of working for pharma, I started to do some work, medical affairs related, educational, with the world of pain medicine. And there was a particular meeting that happened in Chicago, where different people from different companies, different pharma companies, attend and talk with, societies and associations that have to do with pain. And it turns out that in my table, where I was sitting, was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Daniel Carr from Tufts University School of Medicine, professional degree programs. And he was there to not only talk about pain, because he's one of the foremost experts in the US and in the world about pain. But also, he was the program director for a pain research, education, and policy program, PrEP, at Tufts. He presented this program, which was for professionals involved in any kind of pain related service. And it was a program that, because it was geared to professionals, it was a hybrid program. So, what I'm saying, they were way ahead of COVID adjustments for hybrid education. They were already there, they had it all figured out. So I thought, okay, this seems like something that could be a good formula for me to maintain my connection with medicine and healthcare and bring that into the pastoral care side, because the Episcopal Church is really very supportive of what we call bi-vocational service. So I found a niche that I simply had to explore. I couldn't pass that up. So that's how I did it. And what I want to say, Randy, is that because this was a true vocation, I cannot even tell you how much I enjoyed it. It did not feel that like extra work. And I want to send this message to those who are listening to me. Vocation has two important components. One, it should feel some kind of unmet need in the world. But two, it should bring you joy. It has to bring you joy.
Well, it certainly sounds like you got yourself in exactly the right spot. And I think I understand exactly what you're saying. I've met a number of people who have retired from lengthy and successful careers in something very specialized, such as medicine or whatever, and yet they reinvent themselves, sometimes with something totally different, but sometimes something that is at least tangentially connected, as I think this is exactly what you're talking about. When I was in medical school, I had the great opportunity to go to lectures by the late great Dr. Tinsley Harrison, and he would talk frequently about the priesthood of medicine, and that is something that is a real part of the experience. If the practitioner is going to really get anything back from it, as I hope they will, and it sounds like that's exactly what you discovered.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. There's a myth out there, and I know that some of my colleagues believe in it, and I respect that. But we should no longer think that science and spirituality do not belong together, because, Randy, there is data now in many areas showing that there is a beneficial effect of religious or spiritual practices in healthcare. Not all of them. Not all of them is not perfect, but there's enough data saying we need to pay attention to this. We need to do more research. We need to perfect the research in this area, because this is not a crazy construct.
And in fact, you already have, I believe, done some published research, and it looks like, if I'm reading your data correctly, that you're continuing to be involved in research that has been able to truly make the connection in a scientifically examined environment about the connection between spirituality and pain relief.
Yes, and thank you for asking me that, because that's one of the things that I consider one of my most important focus right now. So, as my graduation capstone thesis project at the Tufts program, I chose to investigate the potential role and use of prayer in the management of pain. So for my thesis, I did a systematic review of the medical literature on the use of prayer in the management of pain. And I describe, and this is already published, that there are certain kinds of prayers, Randy, that seem to be beneficial for people that are suffering or perceiving pain. And I also describe data where researchers have shown also the benefit of praying to God as opposed to praying to a generic entity. So this is really fascinating. So when I wrote my thesis and I had the findings in this paper, I discovered that there was one need, clinical need, which was that there were no clinical measures or scales to characterize the types of pain that people use when they are in pain. And what I did was I was very intentional in connecting with the researchers that had the most significant and pioneer research on this. So that led me to the project that I'm working on right now in collaboration with Dr. Samantha Mines, who's a clinical psychologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And Dr. Mines' research had shown that the type of petitionary prayer. In other words, to be very simple, be careful what you ask for. Depending on how you pray, you may help your pain. You may help the way that you feel your pain, but also you may not help it. So Dr. Mai's work is really in the coping mechanism that results from the use of prayer. And we put our heads together between her pioneering research and the way that prayers are typified or characterized. And at the present time, we are doing a study on developing a scientifically validated scale or questionnaire that can be used in clinical research or it can be used at the bedside. And out of that validation that should be happening within the next 6 months, by the way, we just completed recruitment for that study. I plan to create a bedside prayer tool. And I want to make it clear that this is for people who believe in prayer or meditation. This is not to be imposed in anybody who doesn't have that belief, and that's okay. But this tool should help people enhance their devotional practices. And who knows, if we can contribute even just a little bit to the way people perceive their pain, I think we will be doing a great service and we will be creating the kind of language or currency that allows the pastoral workers to connect with the scientific world.
It's really fascinating, and I know it has to be profoundly gratifying to you. So congratulations on making this kind of progress. I could probably keep you on the line for hours and hours. I want to go ahead and close out the interview part of the program right now and get on to giving you the opportunity to speak from your heart and your soul. So I'm going to close my mic and just listen. And audience, here is Dr. Marta Illueca giving us her prescriptions for success.
Thank you, Randy, and thank you again to those of you who are giving time of your busy lives to listen to us today. I have 3 general ideas about what a prescription for success is, and this is about yourself. The first one is really something that I learned very early in life from a song by Bobby B. He was a singer in the 60s. And the song said, "Be true to yourself, and you'll always be true to me." I think the first thing is credibility. I think it's really important to combine prudence with a sense of urgency in everything you do. To do your due diligence in whatever your circumstances are, and then act carefully and responsibly. Because I really believe that it is important to meet our goals with that sense of urgency, but to do it carefully and not be impulsive. The second point I would say is be humble. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt when you may be right or when you may be wrong. You see, every single person out there can teach us a life lesson. And this second point is about cultivating a willingness to learn from every circumstance. And the third point of this prescription for success would be dare to discover and nurture your spirit. Personal growth only happens when we realize that there is something bigger and better than our current version of ourselves. Give yourself permission to believe in a higher power, which some of us call God or simply the universe. Ours is an intelligent universe. See, whether or not you believe that such a higher intelligence created and organized this universe, that doesn't change the fact that we need to get on with the program. We need to respect the laws of life. We need to respect and honor the universal order. And then we can see wonderful things unfold in our lives. This last point is what I call the great experiment, which is be intentional in opening your minds and your heart to inspiration and creativity stemming from this higher power, and be prepared to be amazed.
Well, thank you again so much for sharing, Marta. It has been a real pleasure talking to you, and I know the audience is going to enjoy hearing our conversation. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find more about you and ways to contact you. So if you want to share email addresses or websites or whatever you might have, please go ahead.
I am in Facebook, Marta Illueca, ILLUECA, Reverend Marta Illueca. There's a public page. My place of work, the Brandywine Collaborative Ministries in Wilmington, Delaware, has a page, which is bcmde.org. And you can also find me in Twitter, at Dr. Marta Illueca, at DR, and my name. And then there's an email that you're all welcome to use if you'd like to reach out to me, which is bcmcurate, CURAT, @gmail.com. And if all else fails, I'm sure that you can reach out to Randy and he will channel any communications to me.
Absolutely true. If we get any email inquiries, we will make sure to get you connected in the right place. And one other thing that I will mention that I discovered in snooping around and doing my research is that if you go to YouTube and in the search box simply type in the name Marta Illueca, you'll find a number of videos. The one that I found most compelling was the one that you did on the feast day of St. Francis last year during COVID. So,
oh, yes, thank you.
And with that, I will once again thank you very much, the Reverend Dr. Marta Illueca. It has been a real pleasure, and we appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and all my best to everyone listening to us.
As always, thank you so much for listening today. Remember to follow us on whatever podcast platform you like, and when you do, we really appreciate your reviews and your feedback. It really helps us get better. Also, please visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com, where you can offer your own personal prescription for success on SpeakPipe. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who composed and performs our theme music. And of course, we hope you'll fill your prescription for success with my next episode.